Welcome back to the 99, where we're focused on brewing a better competitive commander. I'm your host, Patrick Marlette, and as sure as I bleed red, white, and blue, you better believe I love a free spell and effect. So today, in honor of July 4th, we'll be taking a look at the 10 most underrated free spells and effects in Magic the Gathering. Now, do note that this is coming from the superior opinion of a competitive commander player, so my word is absolute. Also note that this is specifically for commanders, so these cards may be good in other formats. I don't know, but I hope they are for you. But before we get any further into this video, if you enjoy the content here on the 99, if you feel like you learned something, well, the best way to help support its production is with, of course, via a pledge on Patreon, and there's a link in the description detailing all the benefits you'll receive. But for our Brew Crew and Masters, you get to voice your opinion on the monthly topics, and for our Brew Masters, you get your very own segment on the show. And we have another one slated for this month that I'm very excited to get to. They are Tuesday live streams, and if you haven't tuned in to our Tuesday live streams, I highly encourage you to join if you want the opinion of a master in your hands or just want to have fun brewing a list with me. But guys, I've been getting a lot of questions about the products seen on the channel recently, specifically the playmat and sleeves I've been rocking. Now guys, if you've been looking to get your own custom playmat, sleeves, mouse pads, more, the best place to go to from my experience thus far has been Your Playmat. They are the suppliers of the product you see here, and now a new affiliate. So if you use a link in the description, it's going to give you 10% off your order total, your first, second, it doesn't matter how many times you've ordered from them, 10% off on any product. It doesn't have to be the 99 themed merch, but when you use that link, a 15% commission will go to the channel. So I thank you for doing that. But guys, as with every month, there's a monthly topic to discuss, and for the month of July, what Magic the Gathering set do you feel had the biggest impact on Commander? And that could be anything from Commander precons to core sets to the very current adventures in the Forgotten Realms, all the way back to 2020, where we had Commander Legends spoiled. Now guys, what set do you feel had the best reprints, new cards, new effects that impacted the game of Commander? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below, but I do think at this point it's time to jump into this video, and we have 10 underrated free spells and effects to get into, and these are in no particular order outside of them being alphabetized for my organizational sake. The first spell we're going to tackle. Now, this is an interesting one because it's technically a variable spell. However, if you set this to 0, it destroys turn 1s. As a matter of fact, it puts a stop in a lot of plans midway through the end of the game from the very start. And that card is, of course, Chalice the Void. I'm going to put the art up I love. For XX artifact, Chalice of the Void enters the battlefield with X charge counters on it. It could be nothing. It could be 5. Whenever a player casts a spell with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Chalice of the Void, counter that spell. Now, it's on the cast, obviously. That's how counters work. So you just make whatever spell or, whatever spell they had moot. But the thing is, most players will take that into account from then on out. And the thing is, you could technically plug as much as you want to here, but a lot of people don't think to just drop this at 0 unless you are in a cEDH setting. Then this is a really fantastic sax piece, and I'll try to cover what list want these as well. But Chalice of the Void is just fantastic. If your list does not function off of, a CMC slot like 0 per se, which would make this spell free, then you're in a very good spot. And or if you're on the play and you run a Mox Diamond, a Chrome Mox, and a Mana Crypt in your list, if you have one of those in your hand as well, then dropping the Mana Crypt first sort of gets you around the Chalice of the Void effect. You should be fine. So, Chalice of the Void at 0, the turn 1 destroyer, because a lot of players in the realm of cEDH are manipulating all the fast mana they can to get the ball rolling on their own game plan. Now there's still a few things that will get around this, obviously, if they have a Elvish Spirit Guide or Simian Spirit Guide. Those are free effects that are extremely leveraged and very good for propelling deck strategies forward. However, anything like the Mox Diamond I mentioned, Chrome Mox, Mox Opal, Mox Amber, Rograk in the command zone, anything like that is stopped when you set Chalice of the Void to 0. And what's funny is I played a game recently with another channel. I'll try not to spoil the outcomes of those games, but Ernesto and I played with another channel. I'll link it in the Discord when it comes out. But I was playing Belby, and I got Chalice of the Void down twice, and it was really good. Once at 0, and then another time at 1, and it just stopped. It just stopped the game, particularly at 0. When you get this down early, it's tough for people to, because mostly if you're playing against proactive lists, they mulligan down to that ideal fast start. again, at least in a cEDH setting, and that will include a lot of free spells to just pile up the mana, maybe put out their commander if it draws them cards, or play out, you know, whatever spell they're holding or looking to tutor for, right? And in most cases, it's usually ad nauseum. So actually, as a matter of fact, for some of the cards here, we'll be considering how this might impact ad nauseum because it is a very prevalent card in cEDH. But Chalice of the Void is fantastic at stopping so many strategies and play patterns you see in cEDH, particularly at 0. Now, I'm not sure how common this is in a casual setting, but it's very good. If you're concerned about interaction in the 1 to 2 CMC slot and you're not concerned about playing that kind of interaction, like you're in a very stacks heavy list, this is amazing. You should consider running this if you play stacks in general. Doesn't matter the color, run this. It's an excellent turn 1 play. It's an excellent turn 5 play. Chalice of the Void, I can't get enough of this card. I actually have three copies of it. I recently bought the Seb McKinnon one because, did you see the art? But moving on, the next card I want to discuss, and this is it's situationally dependent. You're not going to put this in every list, and all these cards, I should state, you're not going to want to put in every list. But the Chancellors are often slept on, and maybe you know what I'm talking about, maybe you don't. But they offer you a free effect on turn 1 if this is in your opening hand, right? And this is arguably the best of the lot and my personal favorite. And of course, I'm speaking of Chancellor of the Annex. So for 4 generic, triple white, creature angel, 5/6 body, flyer. Oh, yeah, Pat, how are you gonna cast this? Maybe a reanimator deck? I don't know. Chill. Chrome Mox? Yeah, Chrome Mox bait? Cool. But why do you really want this? You may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, when each opponent casts his or her first spell of the game, counter that spell unless that player pays 1. So unlike a Gemstone Caverns where you can't be on the play, these Chancellors don't care. Whether you're on the play, off the play, it doesn't matter. If this is in your opening hand, you reveal it, and much the same way as a Chalice of the Void stunts starting plays, Chancellor of the Annex does an amazing job of putting a stop to any early game actions with the ability to counter those spells unless someone pays 1. So I found that the typical way to get around this is to have a very slow start. You know, I've seen some people force it by, you know, doing the land into the dork and like, okay, fine, the dork is countered, and then they play out, you know, some other fast mana elements, but that isn't ideal, particularly when, especially in a very mulligan heavy environment, right? When people go down to 6, go down to 5 frequently, or at least I do, depending the list, it really hurts when your first spell gets countered. But what's nice about this, again, I mentioned Chrome Mox, like this is very easily Chrome Mox bait after the fact. It's usually what I do with her. But if I'm in a list like Orzhov, generally where I do slam her, particularly if it's Orzhov sans ad nauseum, because hitting her for 7 really hurts. You don't necessarily want to do that. But if I'm playing a stacks heavy list that's trying to go mid-range and combo out mid-game, this is a really good reanimate target, because on the field, whenever an opponent casts a spell, counter unless that play. We've just read this. We just read this. She does it twice. So early on, if you have her in your starting hand, excellent. Late game, she's just another good entomb target and unmarked grave, but she happens to not be legendary. But this is a good way to put a stop on any sort of storm-based combos, whether it be stunting them from the beginning or stunting them on the combo. This is really good. Obviously, you know, you can cheat this out with Necromancy late game and or Shallow Grave if this happens to be on top of your graveyard. There are great ways to put her on the field to stop a storm before it occurs. Chancellor of the Annex, like all the Chancellors are slept on. They're one of the odder free effects, you know, that don't get played, much like the ley lines that we'll be taking a look at one today. But Chancellor of the Annex is easily my favorite and definitely deserves to see more play. Next up on the list, though, is technically not a free spell or effect. It's just a free thing that you get to do in the game. And I see so many green lists that just don't run this card, and I'm going to encourage you today, whether you need it or not, play Dryad Arbor. Play Dryad Arbor. Why aren't you playing? Why isn't Dryad? Is there something? Unless you're in a polymorph build, unless you're in a build that's using Transmogrify to cheat a more important creature out, play Dryad Arbor. If you're in a cEDH setting and you're not running Dryad Arbor, that's not good. That doesn't bode well. Because even if Dryad Arbor is your Eldritch Evolution target to hit your Thassa's Oracle, well, guess what? Your Wooded Foothills? Sure, we'll crack that. find this Dryad Arbor land creature forest Dryad 1/1 body, and then I'll Eldritch Evolution that thing down. The fact that she's always accessible, she is basically a turn 1 dork if you have Green Sun Zenith. If you guys don't know the trick with Green Sun Zenith, if you play Green Sun Zenith, it gets shuffled back into your deck. You don't even lose it, folks. All the Zeniths do. But if you pay a green and X, you can search for a creature of a converted mana cost of X or less. Well, she happens to be in the or less department, but she has no mana cost, tagged onto her. So you can find Dryad Arbor off of a 0 Green Sun Zenith. So it's basically like having a turn 1 dork, and or get that body on the field with a fetch land and bump up your guy's cradle count, and or just have a body to sack for any various effect. And I mentioned Eldritch Evolution, but it could be Diabolic Intent. It could literally be anything. It is a body. I think bodies are undervalued in Commander, specifically cEDH. Usually don't see that many creatures on the field unless you're fighting a Najeela. It's like, no one really plans for that, or a Kinnan. There's a couple, the Thrasios builds of the world that have the Seedborn Muses, sure. They're very rare in my play group. I mean, I maybe see a Thrasios build in Najeela, or Nesto plays Najeela. Dryad Arbor. Dryad Arbor. You want the body. Even if you don't think you want the body, you want the body. On command. Just being able to get the Dryad Arbor off of fetch land, to have that body on command, is the best part about her, but she's extremely flexible in any list. Put her with your creatures. Just a friendly reminder. Or not. But I'm not gonna like you. Fairy Macabre is the next card on the list. Now, these types of effects have fallen out of favor in recent date. That is grave hate strategies in general, and many people don't play with these whatsoever. And it's odd because in our current meta, Underworld Breach is heavily favored. And so far as interaction is concerned, people don't generally run anything to stop activated or triggered abilities. Like Cyphals aren't used, none of that is used in cEDH. It's just, it's a very slept on form of interaction. So Fairy Macabre has an excellent spot in our current meta, especially if Underworld Breach is prevalent in your particular meta. But at 1 generic double black, creature Fairy Rogue, 2/2 body, flying, discard Fairy Macabre, exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. So it doesn't have to be one individual's graveyard, although it generally will be pending their own playline. Like if they just did Underworld Breach, Lion's Eye Diamond, dump the Lion's Eye Diamond, is prepping for a brain freeze play. What's interesting about this scenario, and we'll talk about 2 scenarios here, but Fairy Macabre in particular for the current cEDH meta against Underworld Breach strategies, if they're using a brain freeze, just because they're digging pretty deep with brain freeze doesn't mean they're going to hit all the essential cards. You can whiff on the brain freeze, right, and not have mana, unless they have that LED still. Well, you can Fairy Macabre while brain freeze is on the stack and crack that LED, just exile the shit out of it. Right? And then, the ideal situation here now for the Underworld Breach player is to find fast mana and hard cast whatever combo, right? In an ideal situation, it would be brain freezing themselves until they hit Thassa's Oracle. Well, if they don't generate the mana to do that, well, they can't do that, right? So in certain situations, Grinding Station is better, and that's like the other Underworld Breach player, because Grinding Station guarantees that any sort of fast mana that we played out earlier is still accessible. We're still filling up our grave, although we're not going net positive on grave, because we need to exile 3 cards and mill 3 cards for Underworld Breach and Grinding Station to work, where Brain Freeze gets you a positive amount of cards in your graveyard. So they both have pros and cons, but in a situation against a Brain Freeze player, well, you can hit the LED and they're out of mana. They're just shy mana, right? Unless they have some way to recover it, like they use Pull from Eternity in their list, which is highly unlikely, but still really good. And this is speaking strictly of Underworld Breach players. There are still reanimate strategies seen with guys like Razaketh, and this stops that, right? You just wait for the animate spell to go on the stack, exile it. Does anyone have anything for activated abilities from hand? Likely not. No one's expecting this. In much the same way that Chancellor the Annex becomes like Chrome Mox fodder, Fairy Macabre can be very much the same pending the table, because sometimes this isn't going to be valuable. Like if no one's using a reanimate strategy or no one's on Underworld Breach would be phenomenal. I would love to see that ever. But most of the times there's at least 2 people on Underworld Breach at a table from my own playgroup. So this is very valuable is what I'm saying. So if you face grave strategies, this is the card to play, because the interaction just isn't there. Unless your particular playgroup knows that you play for this, right? And then they might have like a Tail's End, which should be more common. I feel it's actually quite good. That's for a different underrated list though. All right, moving on. This card it's silently slept on, and it's not on the reserve list though. It feels like it is just because of how old it is. But this card is one of the best to have around at any point. On turn 1 in particular though, Jeweled Amulet is fantastic. So at 0 mana, artifact, pay 1, tap it, put a charge counter on Jeweled Amulet, note the type of mana spent to pay for this activation cost, activate only if there are no charge counters on Jeweled Amulet. So you can never go positive on the counters. Que sera. Remove a charge counter from Jeweled Amulet by tapping it. Add 1 mana of Jeweled Amulet's last noted type. So this lets you have, this is great on a budget. This is great just competitively. Any list can use something to not only piggy bank mana, excess mana off a turn, but also provide you, if this is on your turn 1, a turn 3 play, right? So if you play a land, play Jeweled Amulet, pass, you're holding for some form of interaction, or maybe you have a natural state, or maybe you have some sort of countermeasure in hand. You're holding for interaction. If nothing happens, tap that land, fill the Jeweled Amulet, and on your next turn, you have a turn 3 play, right? If you drop a land. Or further, if you have, more ways like rituals or ways to pump mana onto your board. This is a really great card. Even late game, this is a fantastic card. If you just need to save mana, like you've got a spell in your hand, like that, like you're Necropotence at this point, and you're just not hitting your swamps, no one's played an Urborg, you haven't played an Urborg, but you happen to have an Underground Sea and another swamp. Well, you can fill this with the swamp and then have the 3 black on your turn when needed. It's a great way to color fix. It's a great way to piggy bank any excess mana off a turn. And obviously it's really good for accelerating your own game plan. I do love this card a lot. I got one of these hand painted for my Teshar list, and I really love Rockian in that deck. That list can really use the ramp, and this is one of the better cards for that. This isn't necessarily for every list. Like if you're in a 5-color deck, you likely have better things to do, but in the 2 to 3 color realm, you can get away with using this. This isn't a bad play. Obviously, if you're on Savala, play this. If you're on a list that needs a 3 CMC commander down quickly, Jeweled Amulet is kind of essential. This is a great way to put that 3 CMC commander down on turn 2. Remember that. Pro tips. Now, the next card we're going to be speaking of, talking about Grave Hate. And I want to emphasize another Grave Hate card here, because I know Dothi Voidwalker just released, and now everyone's on the Grave Hate wagon. Everyone likes Grave Hate again because it's Grave Hate with a major benefit. It's like you get to cast shit for free. I understand that that's really good, but Leyline of the Void is still really good. This is still a really good card because for 2 generic double black enchantment, or if Leyline of the Void is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. If a card would be put into opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Well, if there was some sort of dredge thing going on, there's only one guy that comes to mind, the Banana Lord. If there's an Underworld Breach thing going on, if there's a Reanimate thing going on, if they just had value flashback going on, it's all done. It's all kaput. It's almost like, it's like a free Rest in Peace, essentially, right? The only downside to this, as opposed to Rest in Peace, is that Rest in Peace exiles all the things that existed prior, right? Like anything that's in the graveyard on turn 5 when you play Rest in Peace goes away, and it's clearly cheaper. Thank you, White, for having the cheaper stacks piece, equivalent stacks piece. It's rare now. Black seems to be getting like way better stacks elements in the same, opposition agent to Aven Mind Sensor. Way better stacks elements as opposed to White's, but Rest in Peace is still kind of king of Grave Hate. But Leyline's free. Leyline's free circumstantially, but Leyline's free. So what's good about this is it's only your opponent's graveyard, right? And that's one of the benefits as opposed to Rest in Peace, where it hits your graveyard. Generally speaking, if you're running Rest in Peace, you don't care about your graveyard. But Leyline of the Void, it doesn't stunt you from doing your Underworld Breach strategy. It doesn't stunt you from doing any strategy relying on your graveyard. So if you were concerned about that and didn't want to run effects like Rest in Peace, well, this is the good alternative for you. And again, it's free, baby. It's free. Obviously, at 4 mana, maybe not as good and or accessible, but still fine. Like if I pulled this mid-game, I have the mana for it. right? And if I'm in a dedicated Sax list, which you'll likely run Leyline of the Void in, usually a more proactive list, they'll run 0 to 2 Stax elements at most, if any, right? And it'll likely be meta dependent. But generally speaking, a lot of proactive lists are self-serving. Mid-range lists will either rely on control magic and or Stax elements, and they'll have dedicated Stax pieces. And Stax decks will favor this highly, or at least I think they should. Now, it's funny with cEDH. All we ever talk about is Toxic Deluge, Fire Covenant. But what about Massacre? What about good old Massacre? Yes, there's a card in Magic called Massacre. For 2 generic double black sorcery. Or, if an opponent controls a plains and you control a swamp, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. All creatures get -2/-2 until the end of turn. It doesn't care what type they are. It doesn't care if they're yours, your opponent's. Everything takes part in the Massacre. This feels horrible to say. Hey, look at that art, though. Pete Vendors knows what's up. Board wipes. The only board wipe I put on this list that kills creatures, that is. I think probably one of the only sorcery speed spells I put on this list too. Generally speaking, cEDH players favor things that can operate at instant speed, but being able to do this freely on your turn means that you aren't utilizing any mana to get the job done, and then you still have plays to be made, right? So for a board that gets overrun with too many goodies, like I mentioned Najeela earlier, kill Najeela. Oh yeah, she's got 2 defense. Kill the Hull Breacher, kill the Opposition Agent, kill all of the hate bears of the world, many a commander of the world, like my sweet, sweet Teshar. That's a 2/2. Just kill it, destroy it. Hopefully you don't have the board state that's affected by this, right? Obviously don't run Massacre, or play Massacre rather, when your board is like laden with your best creatures, like your Dark Confidant, whatever. Make sure that you play this beforehand and then drop your commander or drop whatever, because you're gonna have the mana afterwards, pending someone has a plains and you have a swamp. Now, generally speaking, Massacre can be sometimes hard to trip because people, when they crack that fetch land, they're usually not jonesing for their, the savannah. They're probably gonna get their bayou instead. White is not generally played for, so seeing a plains can be rare pending the meta, okay? But Massacre is still very good at clearing a board. Again, Toxic Deluge, Fire Covenant, they're nice because they punch above what Massacre can do, but pending the game, this is very good at just removing all of those minor threats. Really good. And again, most all hate bears, outside of Dranith, Magistrate. I'm sure there's another hate bear out there that's got a 3 defense. Archon of Emeria? Is that a 3/2 or a 2/3? For everything else, there's Massacre. But yes, free board wipe. Why the hell not? Now this next spell is... The reason blue hasn't popped up very much in this list is because blue just has an absurd amount of excellent value free spells. As a matter of fact, blue... I don't know the statistics. I don't know if this is 100% accurate. This is purely anecdotal. But from my observations, blue has the best free spells in Magic the Gathering. Blue has all of the best free spells. So the fact that some get tossed by the wayside is of no surprise, because they have Force of Will, Force of Negation, Fierce Guardian. Is it Pact Negation? They have all the free spells. They have all the good free spells. However, Misdirection is one that easily gets slept on. This is still a good free spell. Is it as good as the counter magic spells of the world? No, but it's still very good. Now, I mentioned off the bat that we would gauge some of these lists some of these cards' value based off of an ad nauseum cast. So we'll take a gander at that in a second. But for 3 generic double blue instant speed, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Well, Force of Will, you gotta pay a life too. So this is better, right? It's pretty better. Keep that life. Change the target of target spell with a single target. Now, let's talk about this card's faults. It's 5 mana, so just right at the top. It's 5 mana. So if you're in a Grixis list, a Dimir list, is usually what's seen at the cEDH table, and or 4 or 5 color list, this is a difficult inclusion because you are likely going for an ad nauseum. It's the catalyst for getting a game finished quickly. right? You just put all your fast mana into your hand, you dump all your fast mana, you play for a quick win. 5 life from your 40 life total, and or wherever it's at this point. After you've cracked all your fetch lands, you tapped your ancient tombs, people have been swinging at you because they know you're on ad nauseum. 5 is quite a bit to take, so misdirection gets cut from many cases because of that. But not only that, the exiling a blue card to cast this is not very difficult. Most lists that contain blue, a majority of that deck, all the support cards, and all of the primary win cons, Thassa's Oracle, Lapjace, yada yada yada, they're all blue. They're all blue. So, and blue as a means of interaction is just the best. Like, if you have counter magic, it is the best form of interaction outside of redirects, in my opinion. In certain circumstances, copy spells, redirects can be just as good, but counter magic for the most part is the creme de la creme. So that's not such a hiccup. But target a single target is the issue. So the fact that this can only hit spells that target singular targets can be painful, especially if it's like a force of vigor coming at you, one of your value pieces. You can't reroute that one targeting because this has multiple targets. So you need to bear that in mind as well. But this is very good at rerouting counter spells in the stack. This is very good at rerouting the singular removal, making it come to your benefit. And pending your hand size, it doesn't really matter that you lose this and another blue card, right? Because you just got to do something that's of value for free. Now, again, because of how many good blue free effects there are, it's unlikely that misdirection is going to get slammed in any list. And that's totally fine. But if you do run it, I'd love to find out which list you play it in and what card did you take out for it. And or was it in there initially because you knew it was of value? I'd love to hear your thoughts, but misdirection is just one I never see. It's never played for, but I like it quite a bit. And there's actually one more blue card on this list that I think is even better, way better than misdirection. I cannot wait to talk about. But moving on from there, we have a favorite white card of mine, and it's great because it's at instant speed, but it's also great because you can do it for free. And generally speaking, people don't consider enchantments a huge threat, although we should. But Patrician Scorn says that I can remove all of them. So for 3 generic, 1 white, this 4th of July got me all twisted. I haven't even started celebrating yet. So for 4 mana total, if you've cast another white spell this turn, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Destroy all enchantments. Sithis staple, cast Sithis. Destroy Sithis. Okay, we're not going to use it in Sithis, okay? Teshar staple. I was running this in Teshar for a hot second. Now the issue there is that it's predominantly artifact based. So what list is this appropriate for? Any stacks list containing white that's not utilizing a massive quantity of enchantment based stacks. And generally speaking, those would be your Rule of Law effects, your Deafening Silence, your Rule of Law, Eidolon of the Rhetoric happened to be an enchantment, your Aura of Silence, your Rest in Peace I mentioned earlier, your, Stony Silence. All of those white enchantments are very good and you don't want to destroy them, but I mean, I named maybe 5 or 7 off the top of my head there that are actually quite good, but that's only X amount from a 99 card list. So for every other enchantment, you just don't care, right? You're in a dedicated stacks list, that's where I'm saying this belongs. You're not trying to expediently take out all of the enchantments, but what kind of enchantments were you talking about, Pat? The wild growth out there? Who cares about that? How about the Sylvan Library? I care about that. How about the Mr. Grimora? I care about that. The other one, the Ristic Study? Yeah, I care about that. A Necropotence that someone's like laying on for value? Force them to pay the life. Do it now. Do it now. Or else I'll just destroy it. Any sort of other opposing stacks elements. The Leyline of the Void I mentioned, if someone happens to be on that. Underworld Breach, last second Underworld Breach destruction. Like, you cast your Silence, they say no to that, and you're like, nah. No, we'll destroy the Underworld Breach now with this. Pending, they don't have the cards in their graveyard, right? So it's all situationally dependent. That's okay. Point being, there are a lot of value enchantments that we simply neglect, but if you could destroy all of them freely, you should. You really should. This is an odd card that's definitely slept on, a very cheap one at that. So if you were to pick up one, it's not going to cost you anything but a couple of cents, and hopefully it'll benefit you well. I think in the most scenarios, this is really best just on turn, play your commander, also happens like your Timna, whatever, also happens to be white, play Patrician Scorn, get rid of all the value, carry on. It's really good at just removing value. Now, last up on the list, although there's a bonus 11th card I want to throw your way. We have what I feel is hyper underutilized, extremely good, and very, very potent currently in cEDH. With the strategies I see played in this color that I don't play, this card is of so much value for protection, for, I'm going to call it recursion, but it's just replaying your spells, because Submerge, at 4 generic 1 blue instant speed, if an opponent controls a forest and you control an island, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. This is as free can get. You're going to see a forest, and you're likely playing for islands. Put target creature on top of its owner's library. So, someone casts you cast a wheel, you cast your Windfall, someone casts a Hullbreacher, you cast Submerge. You play Dockside, you make mana, you want to do it again. At the end of your turn, Submerge. Let me get my Dockside back. I need the ramp. Someone's going to try to remove my own hate piece, Submerge. It's so good. If you're playing Narumea, and you have to play Narumea out early for value, Submerge. Get her again. If you have any strategy where your creatures are an important part of your play lines, Submerge. If you need to remove hate, Submerge. If a winning combo is played, Submerge. Unless it's Thassa's Oracle. Obviously, then the trigger's on the stack, and then, what else do you do? Play the counterspell that's in your hand. Whatever. Submerge. It's free. It's free bounce to the top of someone's library. That's the only tricky bit, right? That's the only bit that was probably staving people from inserting this in their list. But consider the fact that on top of their library is a very good thing. With the amount of shuffle effects in the game of cEDH, just cracking a fetch land, if you submerge the opposition agent just to put that shit on top of their library as they fetch, and now they have to shuffle it into their deck, well, it's as good as gone at that point, unless they somehow shuffled it back on top. Man, I really wish Submerge was in a color I played, because I would slam this card easily. Getting it to trip, like getting a forest on the battlefield from your opponent, not difficult. Planning for an island, not difficult. Having this free without ever having to remove another card from my hand in any other condition, this is very easy to play. It's an uncommon it's kind of expensive. It's easily over $8 pending condition, but it's so good. It's just a good card to have in your arsenal. If you play blue, this is one of the free spells I'm going to encourage you just to pick up. Like, I wish I could play it, but I don't brew for blue. But you should enjoy this at least. At least you. Now, last up on the list. This is a bit of an oddity, but one I want to point out because it's a type of free utility that we didn't discuss, and one that I don't think people are very conscious of and really don't play for. But with the amount of wheels that exist in cEDH, this hits the graveyard pretty often. Also coupled with the fact that there are rummage and loot effects that exist in the world, and you can play for those as well. But Ripstone Portal, I love, Judgment. I love when they have the little headstone in the top left. Just so you know that there's something else you get to do with this card. So this land, brilliant art by the way. Tap it, add generic. Okay, that's pretty shit, Pat. But the little headstone, man. Wait up. As long as Ripstone Portal is in your graveyard, lands you control have tap, add green or white. Now, color fixing Selesnya, not that important, right? Who's really playing? Who cares about the white? The green, maybe, but who cares about the white? Well, that's the thing. Who cares about the white until you actually need the white, right? Like you have your Ranger Captain of Eos in hand, you're like, oh, I don't have double white? How do I not have double white? Well, Ripstone Portal ensures you have double white. The thing is, you do need to map out how you get this in your graveyard, but if you're trying to color fix, entombing this, it's just another good target for that. Unmarked Grave. Again, Unmarked Grave. It's not legendary. Ripstone Portal, hundreds of them. They're not legendary. You can put that in your grave, and this is a good way to help you color fix. But easily one of the most slept on lands for its ability. There are other cards that have effects in graveyards like Anger that are played for. But this is one that could definitely see more play provided you need that type of color fixing, because sometimes lists don't have enough entomb targets outside of the main entomb creature, and you may just have a way to like you know, if it's in your hand, then you really don't have an additional target and you're just looking to drop it with like a discard effect, right? And that will do it for this video. The 10 most underrated free spells and effects in Commander, along with that one bonus one at the end. Do you rock Ripstone Portal? Do you play for Submerge? Do you drop Chalice of the Void at 0? Let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, let me know if you learned about any new cards today with this video. And of course, carry on the conversation down below. If there are any free spells and effects that you like to play in your list, let me know what those lists are. Of course, which card that is. I'd love to hear about new free spells. I love me a good free spell. But as I do with all these videos, I'd like to thank one random Patreon member, and that Patreon member through complete randomnicity is Andrew Blank. Andrew is a member of our brew crew and has been on board since September of last year. Thank you, Andrew, for being a member of the Brew Baby crew. You are among the best. And concerning the monthly topic, I'll be reading for Hua Yan. Product? Commander decks. Commander, or EDH, was mostly a format filled with game pieces that weren't designed specifically for singleton multiplayer, which is why the format for so many years was filled with strange interactions and a real sense of discovery. However, the introduction of Commander decks has given WotC a place to design cards specifically for the format, and accordingly guide the evolution of the format in a more direct manner than previously. While naturally not true for every card, it is pretty logical to assume that cards designed for a singleton multiplayer format will have a higher chance of making a stronger impact on the format than cards designed for a 4-of-a-kind 60-card 2 out of 3 to win format. While Wizards designing cards for Commander is not limited just to Commander supplemental products, I would argue that the Commander product line itself was the real start of this trend, because success of that product showed there was a demographic of players out there that Wizards wasn't monetizing as effectively as they had been previously that represented real opportunity. It is no surprise that after the Commander product line era, the format has begun evolving in a clearly more guided way, as opposed to the organic, somewhat random way it had prior. It should also be noted that the focus on Commander happened to also come with Wizards taking more risk with design as a whole, though the two aren't likely related. This interplay is also something to keep in mind. It, for example, showcases the difference between the recent Silver Quilt and Lorehold Commander decks, whose core designers started with very different ideas and philosophies. One has clearly been the subject of competitive interest much more than the other. Well, really flesh this one out, but I'd love to know if you agree with this statement. Do you feel Commander-based product and which particular product left a big impact on the format as a whole, or do you feel Master Set did? 2XM is coming to mind with all those great reprints. But guys, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I will date this video here. Happy 4th of July. Please be safe if you're celebrating today, and if you're watching this, thank you for joining me on this one. Again, my name is Patrick Marlett, and happy brewing, babies.